Combination of historical breakthroughs, the surging demand for energy, AI, of course, have driven commercialization globally, and we see a boom in fusion companies around the world. But what really has contributed to the boom of fusion is a combination of the funding, public-private funding these days, and this has also pushed the interest of private companies to push for their timelines. At today's briefing, we will talk about, we will try to talk about at least two things. One is to be very, very clear about what fusion is and what industry needs to make fusion a commercial reality in Europe. I will go into the details of what our panelists will explain, but from my perspective at least, what I want to make very clear is that we truly believe that fusion is going to be the next big thing that Europe needs, because to get to net zero, it's not only enough to invest and focus on renewables, hydrogen, and everything else. We really need another climate breakthrough to get us to net zero. And we believe that fusion has this transformational potential to get our society and our economy to where we want to be. So with the decisions that Europe will do today, they will be very detrimental for actually getting fusion to where we want it to be. And we also believe that fusion is not just industrial capability for Europe that can bring jobs, but also an investment in our long-term energy resilience and strategic autonomy. So why we need to urgently look at fusion in Europe? Because there is a lot also going on globally. Today we have 7 fusion companies, startups in Europe, and we have here our leading startups representing. But of course they need to work also in the context of the global picture. So what do we need to drive? And this is going to be the answers that our panelists will be addressing. Without further ado, I would like to open the discussion. We will start with Peter Roos, the CEO of Novatron, who is going to explain us about fusion technologies. He will be followed by Sam Guilaume, the CEO of Renaissance. He will zoom into looking at the global picture, the investments as well. And then we will have Dr. Saskia Horsch, Director of Corporate Affairs from Marvel Fusion, together with Günter Kraft, the Chief Government Relations and Communications Officer from Focused Energy. And last but not least, Eszter Kantor, who is the head of international policy for Proxima Fusion. So thank you very much for your time and for the interest in this discussion, and I'm looking forward to the debate. Yeah, well, Peter, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. All right, so a little bit about fusion and the state of fusion right now, because a lot of things is happening, right? And even though many of you, of course, have followed it or at least have a kind of fundamental idea of what it is, most of you, at least your consumer of media, are not aware of the speed and the acceleration of the development of fusion in the recent years. So it's a good idea to actually do this briefing. So to begin with, I mean, why fusion? Why is it important? It's like Olga was stating, it's really something that if it once was a nice to have, we are at the stage where it's a must have, actually, because it's the only technology that we know of that both has the potential to actually meet the climate need and the extended needs of electrifications and the foreseen needs of energy for the different places around the world where they are totally lacking energy. But not only there, if we want to stay net zero, fusion is the only technology that has the potential to actually be that. Yeah. So how does it work? Well, it's actually, even though it is a nuclear technology, it's quite the opposite from traditional fission, which is what you think of, most of you, when we talk about nuclear. So instead of splitting heavy atoms like uranium, you are instead fusing light atoms or isotopes, in this case hydrogen isotopes. It's the easiest isotope to fuse. And to do that, when you do that, you get helium as a result. Helium is an inert gas, and, which is very nice to have because it doesn't have any bad impacts on climate or environment. And is actually also a rest product that is lacking in process industry. Also, you will get an energy, high energy neutron. And it is that energy that we harvest in the fusion process. That neutron is hitting the walls of a fusion reactor. We absorb that heat and we transfer it to a traditional electrical generator through a steam turbine. And that is technology and science we have known since more than 100 years, and we're doing that. So that is kind of fundamentally in the core what fusion is all about. Okay, and this is great because this is not hard to do. We have actually had, first time man did fusion experiments on Earth was in the 1930s. So it's almost 100 years since the first time we produced fusion. The problem is to do this at large scale and continuously to make it meaningful for energy production or other applications where you would like to use high energy neutrons. So how do you do fusion? Well, the great thing is that there are many ways actually to do it, and the industry representatives that we have up here, we are all representing different type of concept of approaches, which is increasing our chances of success. So that's really, really good. So to have fusion, you have to have the product of three things high enough. You need to have a high density of the fuel, in this case the hydrogen. And if you compare to the sun, where you have fusion continuously in the core, the sun has a great advantage with high density of the fuel, which is very hard to reproduce on Earth. Actually, it's impossible as far as we know of today, at least. The second thing is to have a high temperature. This one is actually the nice thing. Even though the core of the sun is 50 million degrees hot, which is hot, of course, that isn't that hard to reproduce or even beat by a lot. So to have fusion on Earth, you need to exceed 150 million degrees Celsius, which is 10 times higher than you have in the core of the sun, which might sound impossible, but is actually quite achievable. Engineers and scientists has already today built solutions where we can reach 700 million degrees Celsius. So that type of technology we are on top of. And finally, which might be the tricky part here, is the energy confinement time, which is how long can you have this energy confined in one place before it dissolves or interacts or get lost out of the process, meaning that you need to add more fuel or more energy to maintain the process. So if you have a good confinement time, it's easier to achieve fusion. The good thing with this is that there are several ways to reproduce fusion here, or create fusion. You can be good at one of them and worse at the other. So there open up a multitude of different type of technologies that can give you these type of solutions. So actually, I was mentioning that we did first in 1930s produce fusion, but already in the 1950s, we did the first conceptual designs and constructions of machines that would be have the potential to actually have a continuous production of fusion energy. We have the first working mirror machine was in the 1952s, and just around the corner you had both the stellarators, and a little later than that you have the tokamaks. A mirror machine was or is a device where you heat up a plasma. The plasma is the hydrogen that the fuel. You heat it up to these needed temperatures. You confine it because it's very, very hot, so it can obviously not hit the walls of anything because that would not stand the heat, of course. So you have to have these plasma in vacuum vessels. And you have to have this plasma more or less floating in mid-air, like in science fiction movies in that sense. But you use very strong magnetic fields with a smart curvature to make sure that they are in place where you want them. So these are different type of magnetic confinement solutions that you have. With different properties, different solutions to solve the challenges needed. So the mirror machine was an oscillating plasma, while the stellarator and the tokamak are inside a rotating plasma inside a toroidal vacuum vessel. The stellarator is a twist to the tokamak in that sense that it is twisting the plasma in such a way that it has the potential to be inherently stable. The tokamak needs other smart tricks to make sure that it has a good confinement time and a stability for continuous. So there are other smart engineering things that you need to do to make sure that you can have a continuous process on that one. Later on, a few years later, there was another track which is also very exciting. It is called the laser inertial confinement solutions. Instead of having a plasma heated into a vacuum vessel, you instead have fuel pellets which you bombard by high energy laser beams. That will also create the fundamental parameters needed for fusion. This has been very successful. Actually, the breakthrough where you get more energy out of the process instead of what you put into it was achieved with laser technology, this inertial solution. So over the years, we have passed over a lot of difficulties. We have moved from being research-oriented to becoming engineering-oriented, and we are now also entering the phase of industrialization. Of course, that doesn't mean that we have stopped doing research, because we do that as well at the same time. But focus is more on how do we make this a reality in our energy systems. So how can we see the progress? Is there a way for us as normal beings, not being nuclear scientists, to understand if we have done some progressions on these? Well, there is one way to interpret and make it somewhat understandable. We talk about something that's called the Q value, which is the quota between the energy input versus the energy output of the process. Like I mentioned here, we have just recently reached the stage where we get more energy out than we put into the process, which is, of course, fundamentally needed, and even higher than that is needed for a commercial viability. If we just go back 45 years to the 1980s, you see that that quota was actually 10,000 times lower than it is today. So that means that at that point in time, you need to put in 10,000 times more energy into the device, this machine, than you got out of the process. A pretty lousy machine for energy production, right? But you need to crawl before you just walk, etc. And now, 45 years later, we have become 10,000 times better at this. So, how much further do we need to go? Well, we have a common understanding when we do the calculations in the industry that you need to at least reach a level of Q30. So you need to become approximately 30 times better than we are today. But put that into perspective that in 45 years we have become 10,000 times better. You understand that we are not far away now from actually having a solution, something that will produce energy to the grid, which is, like Olga was mentioning, the reason why private capital is also interested now. They see need to position themselves. Maybe they are just economically interested in this because there's a lot of money in this industry, approximately 15 trillion US dollars annually, which is, of course, very interesting for many investors. But also, even more importantly, there are very important strategical positioning to be done nationally, but also utility companies who want to make sure that they have the latest technology that has the potential to supply with more or less endless amount of energy at low cost. And then you have all other type of applications where they're in a need of heat, other neutron, high energy neutron applications as well, etc. All these are gathering up, doing the development in combination with the fact that we also have a situation where technology is in favor for us. We are now having supercomputers, we're having AI, we have tools we could only dream of only 10 years ago, which makes it possible for all of us to do simulations on our different concepts and see how it could work, how we can optimize the processes. So that really is making not a linear progression, but an accelerated progression of how the development now is going in all our different respective fields. So, right, energy politics, we mentioned that. There is a need from a climate perspective, economic competitiveness. Well, there is other things here for that is actually driving the energy transition right now and the development of fusion technology. And there is important to set this in an EU context, because my other colleagues here will talk more about that. There is a lot of interest, strategical interest in advancing this technology to be a technology leader on a world level. And EU needs to do something differently to actually have a chance to compete, not only about having a technology that will provide us with this energy for resilience, but also to address this extraordinary large export industry with a potential to give wealth to our whole society through the supply chains, of course. We have different companies. We have in EU six different concept companies. We have 3 that are laser-induced. We have focused energy. We have Marvel Fusion, but also GenF, which is a quite new one. We have on the tokamak side the ITER project that is going on in Cadarache in southern France, which is a large project funded by a variety of different countries and collaborations, including EU, of course. And then we have 3 stellarator concepts. We have Renaissance Fusion, we have Gauss Fusion, and we have Proxima Fusion. And finally, there is one mirror machine concept, which is Novatron. And they are all advancing quite well. All these different companies are growing rapidly, and they are working hard with attracting both funds and also progressing on regulatory and other strategical, very important questions for the success of this industry. All right. I think I actually stop there, because otherwise I will start to step into areas where my other friends here, Sam and Saskia, will bring this further on. Any questions on these fundamental things about the fusion, how it works, or anything about the core of these machines?
I can maybe, if there's no other question, I can maybe just kick it off and ask you a question. So I think what we are getting all the time in terms of questions when we talk about the diversity of technologies out there, as you mentioned very well, I think it's more than 50 different approaches globally, technological approaches. So then the question always is, then how do you know which one is going to succeed, and what kind of conditions then are needed when you see this diversity of approaches out there? Are they all going to succeed, or you talked about convergence? So how do you see that in the next few years?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I have full respect that it's very hard for anyone, including our own companies actually, to really foresee which one or which of these different concepts will succeed. I see that all of them have a potential to succeed. I'm quite sure that there will be a number of them that will go all the way to actually be able to build different type of fusion power plant designs based on different concepts. It might take different time to realize them. They might cost differently. They might have different USPs, which makes them more applicable to different type of usage than others. So there will be a differentiation among them. But it, all in all, is very, very hard to predict which is most viable, whatever that means, etc. So from a strategical point of view, which is, I think, most important from an EU perspective, is that we can't foresee, that's the fundamental thing, we can't foresee which one will be the most successful, if there is any one of that that can be called that. We need to support the whole community of fusion, because there are other great things that will come out of this. These technologies that are being developed can have other applications, new inventions, new entrepreneurship will produce other fantastic and successful companies. So we need to support it widely.
Maybe there are other questions from the audience. Then in 2 words, what will make or break the fusion technology in your view?
I think that we need to be able to compete with China and US, and I, for obvious reason, have big respect for their capabilities in advancing on this, because they are absolutely having this on their highest priority on their strategic agenda. We need to do things not only better, we need to do things differently. So I see that we need to find frameworks in the EU to support the private industry in good collaboration with existing academia and other institutions that are progressing on this. And we need to find smart collaborations, combining knowledge and do projects together that can be beneficial for all of us.
Thanks, Peter. I think this is kind of a very good link now to Sam. You will show us around the global picture about fusion, and also maybe zooming a little bit into investments and how you see from a global perspective and the impact, of course, for Europe.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. And I think you're going to hear a lot about collaboration today. That's definitely what we are aiming at. So. Sam Guilaume, I'm CEO of Renaissance Fusion, a company based in Grenoble, France. So let me start maybe by making a blunt statement. Fusion is at a tipping point. And as Peter demonstrated, there has been quite a lot of demonstrations over the years about how to make fusion on Earth. And it's not about science anymore, it's about making this commercially viable and industrially viable. Considering that we are still 5 to 10 years away from making a commercial power plant, the race to industrialization starts now, right? So the race has begun, and you can see with a number of startups that we have all over the world that it's very active. It's active in China, it's active in the US, it's active in Europe. I think we counted something like 70, even 100 type of companies in fusion worldwide. So this is really a race going on out there. When you think about industry, you need also to anticipate about what's going to be the supply chain and how what kind of sovereignty we can get from there. So allow me to take 3 examples to indicate or to illustrate the issues we have regarding supply chain. So number 1, quite a few projects or quite a few machine fusion will require very strong magnets. Peter mentioned a couple of them. Renaissance Fusion is a magnetic confinement company. So we do require and we do rely heavily on very strong magnets. So all of us, common individuals, the biggest magnet we're exposed to, or the biggest magnetic field we're exposed to, are MRI machines, typically 1.5 Tesla. We need about 10 times more, right? So to build such a very strong magnet, we rely on products or on materials called high temperature superconductor. And if you look at who produces high temperature superconductor today, you have mainly 2 countries. One is China, And the other one is Japan, with a company called Faraday, which is, a lot of Russian people in the background. Nothing against them, but when you think about sovereignty, of course, it raises a few questions. We at Renaissance, we build our own HTS so that we are going to use the HTS we are going to build, but we also want to become a supplier for the fusion industry. And not only the fusion industry, by the way, because you can have application of HTS to medical imaging, energy transportation, and quite a few, right? So there is a matter already on sovereignty when it comes to HTS. Again, today it's only Asian-based, and we want to again, regain sovereignty. Another material which is critical is lithium, although lithium can be found globally. And by the way, Peter mentioned before the fuels which are required for fusion. Both of them can be found, all around, right? So there is no geopolitical dependence to the fuel itself. There will be geopolitical dependence to whoever master fusion, who can design fusion, who can manufacture fusion, and who can maintain and control fusion, right? So back to lithium. Lithium can be found globally, but most of the fusion projects require enriched lithium. And if you look at the supply chain of enriched lithium today, again, two countries, Russia and China. Main reason for this, it's a mercury-based process which is heavily toxic, which is also very damaging for the environment. So we don't have actually lithium enrichment outside of China and Russia today. We have developed, although we use natural lithium in our design, we have developed a process which is mercury-free. And again, within 24 to 36 months, we expect to also become a manufacturer or producer of enriched lithium. So that's another issue when it comes to a long-term, or when you're thinking about having a long-term viable industries, that again you have to think about supply chain. The third one that we want to worry about also is tritium. So tritium is actually a radioactive product, which is under very strong constraints. There is only one country producing tritium today, it's Canada, and most of the usage are either a nuclear application for fission or military applications. So most of the companies that you see here are pursuing self-breeding tritium so that we are going to generate our own fuel, right? We could go into the detail about this later on, but essentially when you have lithium that you bombard with neutron, it's going to generate tritium. So all of us, we are working actively on self-breeding tritium so that we don't have this dependency to tritium producers. However, we still need external tritium to ignite the machine, right? So there is some dependency, but not too much. So that's about actually the main topics when it comes to supply chain. As you can see, Europe lags. We are falling behind in terms of again gaining sovereignty on any of these three topics. Let me switch to financing, although it's going to be we're going to talk more about this later on. 13 billion have been invested from the private money in fusion companies as of end of 2025. Out of these 13 billion, 7 billion were invested in the US across 44 companies. 4.4 were invested in China across 8 companies. And we were left with less than 5% of this amount, 700 million. Mainly invested in Germany, by the way, and congrats to companies here, Proxima and Marvel, and it goes also very well with having public and private funding. You may have seen already that Germany has announced a 2 billion envelope for fusion, right? And we have yet to see this in other countries in Europe. And there is usually a strong dependency about public financing and private financing, right? So we're all looking for having more money, public money, so that we can also attract private financing, right? So yeah, for the financing, you can see also that again we are lagging behind. And last but not least, when it comes to regulation, Regulation is another interesting topic also around fusion. So there is essentially two competing models today. One is a model which is based on what has been done in the past, so fission, right? So this is countries like France in particular. ITER, being located in France, falls under the nuclear policy. Very heavy, very long to get a operating license, very costly because very long, right? So this is what we today fall under, at least in some part of Europe. Conversely, you have geographies like the US where they consider fusion to be closer to radio protection type of policy. So it's like having a big X-ray machine, if you will, right? So way lighter when it comes to paperwork and getting your license, and obviously way cheaper. So this is also something that is a call for action for all of us, and for us being in Brussels is how can we get regulation which are not looking for a free pass, right? We are looking for something which is well adapted for what we do. And again, I think the truth is going to be anywhere between, not fission, not radio protection, but somewhere in the middle, right? So that's what we'll be looking at also. I can pause if you have any questions, or maybe Olga, if you have some.
Thank you, Sam. I see a question there.
Juliette Portela, Science Business. You said at the very beginning that it's not about science anymore, that it's really about making fusion energy commercially viable. What does it mean exactly? Does it mean that we've discovered everything we needed, that there is not much research that is still going to be involved? Could you expand a bit?
So that's not what I meant. Maybe if that's what you understood, let me correct this. What I'm saying is that we are 10 years away from making something commercially viable. At least that's what most experts, which I'm not, by the way, most experts actually converge on. And if you consider this, it's going to take actually these 10 years to get ready. You could argue that whatever science has not been resolved yet is going to be fixed within the next 10 years. And coming from a completely different industry, I was absolutely blown away to see how much international collaboration, scientific international collaboration, there is ongoing. And I may be overly optimistic when it comes to human ingenuity, but a lot of it has been done. And the challenges that we see ahead of us, we are actually a stellarator company, and the challenges we see ahead of us, they don't look like sci-fi at all. They look like deep tech. They look like scientific reality as opposed to being sci-fi, right? So again, the transition has started, right, toward industrialization. That's really my take. But maybe some of us may have a different point of view.
Just one other aspect to add to this, so I completely agree with that. And I also want to say that you don't need to have 100% everything ready and standing in order to start financing new industrialization. You cannot be first in something if you join it when everything's been already done. Then other nations will take over you. So that's the point.
And of course, there is differences, different varieties of challenges between the different concepts. But in general, I would say that we understand the physics at a level now where we have different paths for actually develop the technology. It won't be easy, but now at least we know the play field.
Maybe somebody from the laser companies, because you just heard magnet. What we usually say, it's not a scientific problem, it's an engineering problem. Maybe you remember when the first car engine was there, and then you look how a car engine looks today, Formula 1, whatever. This is what we have to do. We have to improve the scientific, not to research into the scientific too much. And that's the difference now. That's what you said.
And if we could make an analogy, right? I think, again, that's my personal statement, but again, maybe some here will echo. If you look back 5-7 years ago, when you were talking about AI, everybody was saying it won't happen, it's too expensive, it requires too much processing power, too much memory, whatever, right? I mean, you had a lot of people saying it will never happen. See where we are today, right? So, you know, you could definitely argue that we are in fusion today where we were in AI 5-7 years ago, right? And I would even actually dare another analogy, semiconductor industry, which is, you know, where I'm coming from. 40 years ago, one country, Taiwan, decided to invest heavily, you know, on semiconductor, and, you know, see what they've done. TSMC, the leading provider by far. This is probably what's going to happen actually in fusion. The champions are being built today. So who is going to be, which country is going to lead? This is really what is at stake today.
Any other questions? Sam, I wanted to just pick up on something you said about the supply chain before we move to the other panelists. It's a very simple question. How do we avoid the mistakes Europe has done being dependent on other countries in other sectors when it comes to the supply chain? How do we avoid that happening to the fusion industry, as we see now the realities are actually going into that direction? How do we fix that?
Simple question doesn't lead to a simple answer, unfortunately. I think there's quite a few things at stake, right? Number one is being active now, and I think the now is really critical. You know, the more we wait, you know, the wider the gap. And you know, we have. I'm absolutely convinced we have all the capabilities we need. We have actually all the engineering resources we need. So it's not a scientific, you know, issue anymore. It's not an engineering issue even. It's really about industrialization, and what is required for this is, you know, the ease to operate. So financing, regulation. And that's pretty much it for the most part. Right?
Thank you. That actually leads me naturally to the next part. So after hearing a little bit more the bigger picture, a little bit more about what fusion is, of course, we would like to see from European industry perspective what business needs to make fusion, to scale up fusion and make fusion a reality in Europe. So I would like to start perhaps with Saskia. What would you say? What do you need? What kind of, if we look more specifically on the investments and financial part, what do you need as a company? As we just heard that fusion is growing in Germany, and we heard about the budgets that are allocated in Germany. How do you put this in context, and what do you see from your perspective? What do you need Europe to do?
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me as well. As one of the second laser-based fusion companies, I'm happy to be here. Marvel Fusion, maybe for those who don't know, we're based in Germany. We're focusing on commercializing laser-based fusion, and we're quite well advanced in what we do. We're now, you know, working on several projects in Germany. We have, you know, expanded on our R&D facility with the university in Munich, and we're now working actually on our first demonstration facility in the US. And then the next steps are planned here for Germany. And so I would say, you know, to your point, we're indeed transitioning to industrialization, demonstration projects. There will always be continuing R&D developments and questions to be solved, but I think we have come a long way, and we're building on the breakthroughs that we've seen, particularly in laser-based fusion, with the results that we've seen, the breakthroughs we've seen in with the NIF, the National Ignition Facility, a few years ago. So I think you know, we're well underway. Now, you know, commercializing fusion and building this up in Europe will require a lot of things. This is building up an entire new ecosystem, right? So we will need to have an effort of all the different players, and we will all have to work together to get this done. I think when I start looking at the political level, I think one key ask from our side would be to make sure that this is really prioritized topic, right? We have seen with other industries when politics puts a topic very high up on the agenda and declares this a strategic priority, which I believe no one disputes that fusion is, since we're all in need of energy, and we always will be with the growing demand, then this is one of the key priorities or key asks. I think we've seen in the current or in the proposal from the Commission and the MFF, so the multi-annual financial framework, that the proposal is to define fusion as a moonshot. And a moonshot is basically a multi-annual effort, high-risk technology requiring significant funding. And if you declare something as a moonshot, then it allows politics to go about it in a totally different way. So they can come up with totally different funding logic. They can give it more expedite treatment, and there will be just much more attention to it. And so I think that will be one thing that is really important, is to keep this sector fusion as a moonshot now in the forthcoming discussions with the Parliament and the member states, to really make sure that we get the political attention and we can build up the required frameworks that work for fusion. The second thing, and that flows from that moonshot definition, is that we need an efficient public-private partnership model, right? So something that involves industry much more, that moves from purely R&D funding, which is what we have right now in Europe and in member states, to more of an industrialized funding logic, and something that is longer term and not just project based. And once a project is done, then you move to the next one. We really need to have something that is coordinated and well crafted, so that we can get to the power plant that we actually want, the fusion power plant that we actually want to achieve in the end. So much more of a focus on effective public-private partnerships is what we need. And we have other countries where this has been implemented actually quite successfully. So for example, in the US, the colleagues there have put up a milestone-based funding program, which basically means that industry will determine, together with politics, will determine the milestones that need to be achieved. They're quite ambitious. Industry will be asked to go into funding upfront, so they have to find the private investments to then, only receive state money once they demonstrate that they have verifiably achieved the milestones. And that allows actually, in such a system, with such a program, you can actually start off funding all the viable technological approaches, and only will you continue to invest state money where a technology actually proves that it can deliver on what it promises. And it will attract private money, private capital, because investors will see that states are engaged, are committed, and will not stop funding until we actually reach the end goal. So I think such a system is what we need, such a different logic, right? So, and then of course from that flows on funding. I think private investment will always be, the number one element. We're all privately funded, and we will continue to look for private capital. But we will not be able to reach, fusion power plants without public support. But it needs to be in a smart way, right? So milestone-based funding programs, like I just mentioned, would be one way forward. At some point, when we get into more infrastructure heavy investments, then we can work with loans that are backed by state guarantees. You could get the EIB to work to chip in. We have actually quite a few instruments that are around that could be leveraged. They're just at the moment not sufficiently tailored to the needs of fusion companies, right? They're a little bit too difficult to reach. Application requirements are too high, and they don't allow early stage projects like ours to actually apply. So I think if we go about funding and the structure in that way, that we take what we have already, make it more efficient, and put it all together in a program that is milestone based and conceived for the longer term, then I think we can reach our goal.
Thank you, Saskia. Maybe we can just move on to the other speakers before we open for questions, unless there is something that you would like to ask now immediately. And I would like to address then to Günter. because coming from one laser to another laser company based in Germany, we mentioned also the supply chain in the bigger context. But can you answer the same question? Like, what do you need for you and for your fusion approach to fly? What do you need from Europe? And can you elaborate a little bit more also from a supply point of view? What are the gaps? What are the urgent needs to make it happen?
Certainly. We laser-based company, laser fusion company based in Germany. And we have now a site where we can build together with RWE, which is a power company. And we wanted to build, or we're going to build our first laser facility there. And talking about the supply chain, I'll give you an example. We put in some diet pump later, whatever this is, you know. However, we have in Germany a company called Osram, and they do this, but they had stopped to build this because usually you use it for the diet pump laser for the defense part, and they, for whatever reason, they did not have enough business, and we had to buy this in China. So our first lasers, the diet, the glass and stuff from China. If we want to build a power plant, if you're talking about building a power plant and Germany is saying we want to be the first and blah, 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 we need 1,200 of these lasers. We built this together with Trump. Trump is also the lasers which are in ASML. ASML is a Trump laser. And then we need glass, simple things. We need glass for it. Glass and crystals whatsoever. Who are in Europe the number one? It's Schott. It's a German company. They have facilities, but they have it in the US, not in here. Doomed. They need to build facilities here. Heraeus, who delivers the crystals who are in these lasers, very complex stuff, all of what they build today, which is a third of their full production, they're selling into China. We need this here. So how to convince them to give it to others, not to China, because there's an existing business. This is supply chain, what we're talking about. It's not just the lasers, it's the glass, it's the stuff inside and size in it. What I want to say is we have the industry here in Europe, and I think it's the same for magnet if I'm talking about it. So, and even magnet, I must put a stake for you in the ground, because magnet is, Europe is traditionally a magnet fusion continent. Laser comes from the US, but the technology we have, the industry we have here. So coming to the supply chain, if we're now putting 200 million into people in the site, but they need billions at the end of the day. You know, they ask us, give us 500 million, and we start building a facility to produce that. Schott needs to produce the glass. These days, they can do 2 tons of this glass. We need 20 tons per year. And this is supply chain. So when we're sitting here and asking for money, we don't need that money. The industry needs that money to build our facilities. It's not us, it's the industry. So it's a European industry project, what we're talking about here.
Thank you, Günter. I will move immediately to Eszter, and then I'll open for questions. Because we talked about investments, supply chains, but we actually haven't really talked about frameworks, European frameworks, policy, regulations. So, Eszter, can you tell us, of course, we are expecting the European fusion strategy coming. What do you need? What Proxima needs?
Yes, so I'm representing Proxima Fusion. We are a Munich-based stellarator company. And I just want to piggyback on what has just been said by Günter, that what do we provide as a future perspective for Europe? And it is homegrown electricity. So cutting dependencies, and this ties in perfectly with the North Sea Summit tomorrow, where there's a massive show of force for wind power generation, right? Fusion is the industry that provides a stable baseload into the electricity grid, and you can integrate renewables on top of them. So this is also benefiting the renewable sector. Fusion is not competing with renewables, it empowers them, pun intended. And what we actually are looking to see is fusion being treated on par with other renewable technologies. What that means is we are currently bracketed under the Net Zero Industry Act as other nuclear technologies. We would like to have our own standalone technology bracket under the Net Zero Industry Act, and that would actually pave the way for other financing instruments. Europe is unfortunately lacking in the venture capital volume of the United States, and we are applauding the European Commission's efforts to reverse that via the Capital Markets Union. We are seeing fantastic gains and new proposals, and we can, only hope that this comes as fast as possible, opening the way, incentivizing investors to put money into real European companies that actually are going to power the Union in the next decade or so. And one of the first instruments for this is the fusion strategy, which we are eagerly awaiting from the European Commission. We believe, and we are hoping that it is going to be commercially oriented. We have heard ITER mentioned before. ITER is a research project. We are now talking about commercialization. The two are in a different field, and but what ITER has done and its tremendous benefits that it has created is the supply chain, the European supply chain. Closing the remaining gaps is very important, as we have heard, but the majority of companies are here. That doesn't mean that Europe can rest on its laurels, because other competing countries are working very hard to create their own supply chains. So this is something that it's a constant effort that needs to be done on behalf of Europe, and not just the European Commission, but working together with the member states as well. We are seeing the emergence of an IPCI on nuclear technologies, including fusion technologies, that are very, very important and can bring together collaborations within the supply chain that can also pave the way for future development, industrial development, and just increase the speed of the industrialization and the deployment. What we will see is a very rapid pace of emergence of fusion technologies and fusion technology players in the coming years, and it is important to anticipate that. So what is necessary is for policymakers to be forward-looking. And I appreciate the fact that there are a lot of things that are happening in today's world that take the attention away, but tomorrow is also there on the horizon, and I think that must be taken into consideration.
Thank you, Eszter. I would like to open now for some questions. Yeah. Chloe.
Hi, thank you. John Inger for Bloomberg News. I'm just wondering if the panel would be able to share its thoughts on where ITER is currently, and whether you see the private sector overtaking it, and what the outlook is for it, given especially Trump's approach to fusion in the US. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's a big topic. I will try to make my remarks on that one. ITER is, like I mentioned earlier, a large project. It's a collaboration project, international peace project, initially initiated in 1985. And it has a remarkable collaboration with countries like US, Russia, China, Japan, South Korea, India, and EU participating together in developing this fusion reactor based upon a tokamak concept based in France. EU is covering the cost for approximately 45%, which is the largest contributor to ITER, and that is a massive project. It is actually the largest project in man history, and most of us are not aware of it, but the purpose is good, of course, and developing, researching and developing a technology which is for mankind, and the best of it. However, they have been constantly having trouble with the timelines, constantly delaying it, and the costs have been much higher than first thought, and we still don't know neither the time or the cost of that project. Secondly, which I would say is a large issue for specifically EU, is the fact that in EU we have no tokamak concepts actually in the private industry. Still, we are funding that project as the largest contributor, which means that EU is developing knowledge and technology which is very good for US, China primarily, funded by us. And there is reason to rethink about how we can better support the EU industry with the resources and knowledge built up in the surroundings of ITER project.
Yeah, just to add actually, and it back I think to the first question we had before. If you look at ITER and the very numerous replicates that you have around the world, this is pretty much what triggered, the sentence I mentioned before. It's not a science project anymore. So we know how to do fusion reliably, if I may say so. But you have to look also at all the. So ITER was never designed to be an industrial project per se, right? However, it has significantly contributed into the supply chain, and as Peter mentioned, not only Europe benefit from the supply chain, but all the players, and some are way more active than others, right? Back to the point about HTS, suppliers before, and so on and so forth, right? So it has achieved, and I think it's achieving against the mission ITER was given. We have yet, us European, to collect the benefits of the fruits of what has been done there. Right? So I think we triggered. It's an international project, not only financed by Europe, but we are a significant contributor. We have yet to get all the benefits that we invested in.
Maybe if I can just add to this point, let's be very clear. ITER is a success indeed so far as a research project. And we believe that in order to move on, we need to, of course, because of that, Europe is a leader in the global supply chain. But in order to move on with commercialization of fusion, we need to adapt that to the needs of what industry needs. Maybe some need ITER, maybe not even. So we would like to build up on it, and we see how commercialization, of course, with the benefits of what has been achieved so far in Europe from ITER, can go together in Europe.
Hi, Federica Di Sario from the Parliament Magazine. Thank you so much for the super interesting briefing. I just wanted to go back to a basic fact, which is you said that there is an urgency right now for Europe to catch up with the US and China. And I was wondering if you could spell out what are the risks of Europe missing this one and not catching up, whether those are also security risks or whatever you think is the real challenge for us. Thank you.
Well, I think it's about losing access to energy, right? To make a very blunt statement, right? Today we have dependency on fossil energy. If you look at photovoltaic, you could claim that also we have dependency because, to my knowledge, not any of the PV that we are using is manufactured in Europe, right? With wind farms, it's pretty much close to this as well. So we are completely losing, any sovereignty when it comes to access to energy, right? And you could definitely agree that energy is really what is required for anything we want to do, right? From mobility, I mean, I don't need to name it, but it's absolutely fundamental that we regain sovereignty when it comes to our access to energy. And fusion is definitely a unique opportunity now, right? I mean, we have built some sovereignty when it comes to fission, right? And again, fusion falls into a mix of energy. It's an energy mix, so we want to have all the significant contribution, and fusion is definitely the one that's going to be way more efficient. We didn't talk about cost earlier, and I think we should also, right? Look at the cost of building a fission plant. Look at the cost of building a solar plant delivering 1 gigawatt of continuous power. You will realize very soon that fusion is going to be way cheaper. Once we understand how to do this commercially, it's going to be way cheaper than any of the alternatives. So it's clean, it's continuous, and it's cheap relatively to the other options.
You want to go first?
Yeah. The risk is think of what we have today. Forget about for a second the wind and the solar, because when we talk about energy, we're not only talking about the light here. 2/3 of it is industrial energy, and we're an industrial continent here, and we export most of the stuff. So what energies we have today? We have fission. Okay, I'm coming from Germany. Okay, doomed. However, we have oil, we have gas, we have coal, and even with fission, we depend on uranium. Do we have this in Europe? No. But what we have is the industry for fusion. So if we lose this to China, and China just built 2 new facilities that just throw money into that and learn a lot. And they're catching up in magnet fusion and soon in laser fusion as well, really fast. So do we want to lose this again, like we lost the game with a lot of other technology? You said it, solar, we lost it. Do we want to lose again, or do we want to lead? Right. We lost the computer area, but here with the deep tech, we are still in the lead, and we have the industry behind it. It's our industry, and this is the risk that we lose them.
I just wanted to, sorry. So what is the competitive advantage, right, of being faster? So one is that the knowledge of the assembly, the design, so they get faster in front of us. And then the other thing is that they fuel their own industries, right? The AI, gigafactories, whatever they have in place, that just gives us a much broader advantage industrially. So this is not just about fusion, this is all about electrification and AI and the next generation of technologies.
And maybe one last comment, it's also urgency to put up the right frameworks to stimulate the development of fusion, right? It's not about having a fusion on the grid 1 year earlier or later than other countries. It's really about now's the time to really put the frameworks in place, because it will take time to have everything developed. We see, in the current political environment, how Europe is slow, with the system that we have. So I think there's a super urgency to now come up with the right smart incentives and frameworks so that we can actually the ecosystem can develop and fusion can develop, and this is also meant by high urgency, right?
Thank you. I thought there were other questions. Yeah, there.
You mentioned the MFF proposal and the Moonshot project that are very much focused on technology progress and deployment, but there are lots of people saying that maybe we're sort of neglecting the whole humanities and social sciences part that is required to make sure that there is a broad approval, especially from consumers. We see how nuclear fission is getting so much pushback. So for fusion energy, that seems even more, let's say, far away and maybe dangerous for people. How do we make sure that it's going to be approved and accepted by consumers?
So I fully agree that raising awareness is very important. Currently in Europe, nuclear technologies are equated with fission. So there is a lot to be done, not just on a policy level, but on the everyday citizen level, to make people understand that nuclear no longer includes just fission, but fusion technologies, and that the fundamental risk factors are very, very different. Fusion is a lot safer technology. We don't operate with long-lived, high-level nuclear waste. Just the overall concept is something that you can live with. So this can be in your backyard.
And can you imagine 3.5 years ago, living in Germany, talking to a politician and say, we do nuclear energy. They stopped us in the middle of the sentence and said to us, we don't do anything with nuclear. So yes, I agree, we have to evangelize. First, I mean, we startups, we are the smallest part of it, you know. We have to evangelize. First we did the politicians, so they get awareness in it. We have it in the coalition contract now in Germany, we have it in Hessen where we are, and we need to get it further on. So this is done, but now we need to go to the, in Germany we say Gretchen and Blätchen, that means to everybody, you know, and explain them, this is good for you. This is not harming you. This is not replacing solar and wind, because they always come, oh, invest the money in solar and wind. Yes, but tell this to the industry. It doesn't work, you know. I mean, we don't have that space, and we don't have that much sun. So this is something we have to do, but we need you as a journalist, you know, to help us to do this, because we depend there on you, actually.
I would like to oppose the opposite in some sense. I mean, it's harmful not to do fusion, because the alternative is worse. Going fossil is not an alternative. And you can think what you like about fission, but there are risks related to it. Being able to supply society and industry with renewables in the form of solar and wind, etc., and a stable base, it's not possible, actually, regardless of what some people think. Not doing fusion means that we will be so way beyond, or we are living with alternatives that will harm our lives and society even further.
Yeah, but maybe one just final thought. I mean, with all of these big projects that people don't, you know, have difficulties assessing whether this is a risk or not, in particular those that will see fusion power plants somewhere in their communities. It's always this reaction, not in my backyard, and I don't know what it actually means. So I think it's really important to bring people along early on, and we are in early stages now, and it's great that there's a big debate in many countries already, and that there, you know, the media reports about these developments. And I think what we see in Germany, at least, the government is proposing to create hubs around the different technologies, which would bring together the ecosystem, and exactly these kind of things, you know, informing people, communication campaigns, open door events, etc., is integral part of the plan. And so I think that would be super important, because we do want to avoid misconceptions and people opposing this because of wrong ideas.
Maybe just to add the final, I mean, understanding actually the science behind fusion, that fusion is not a chain reaction, it's the opposite. So it doesn't really include any of the associated risks of a nuclear chain reaction, because if the reaction doesn't happen, it's merging of two atoms. And if it doesn't happen, then the whole process fails and there is no process. So, and just to mention, as Peter said in the very beginning, there are many technological approaches that don't even use any nuclear fuel, if you may say, if this is any risk at all. I thought I saw some other questions, maybe. Anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, just wondered if you could go into more detail about what you need to see at the EU policy level about a potential framework going forwards. Anything concrete would be great.
So, yes, so I mentioned the Net Zero Industry Act. I also think that fusion has a role in taxonomy, so that would also help us with improving the flow of environmentally linked financiers into the sector, as well as, of course, the IPCI and its continuation, as we have seen it in other sectors before. In the CHIPS Act, there's a first-of-a-kind label to manufacturing facilities that facilitates permitting and licensing. That is also very much needed. What else did I miss from the innovation fund, which is a massive financing tool for renewable technologies? I think fusion has a well-earned place in that, especially as we design pilot facilities or demonstrators and then full-scale power plants.
And just to add to this, startup and scale up strategy.
Yeah, and the fund.
And exactly, because that would be important for funding instruments. So there's quite a lot of good stuff coming from DGRTD actually.
We know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, we are like children wishing for Christmas, right? But actually, we need to be realistic also. I mean, EU do have challenges right now with budget and other things that are of concern, not needed to be mentioned here. So I think we need to have at least one short-term aspect as well as a long-term aspect. Short-term, we need to do something now. We can't wait for like 2 or 3 years from now to start acting something that really makes a difference to industry. That will be too late because the train is running fast right now on a global level. So how do we do that? Well, use the existing instruments, but make sure to adopt the criteria to adopt to fusion industry, because we, both on a national level as well as on EU, we see that where the fund exists and we see that we can apply, we fail due to the fact that we are a novel industry. We can't fulfill the requirements on maturity, which means that we can't really get any support in the existing instruments that we have right now. Do something about that. That should be the fastest thing to just do for the whole industry as well as the supply chain. Secondly, create the instruments needed, more adopted for us, for a sustainable development of an industry. That, I like the comparison with Taiwan and their strategic and bold move at that time to building up and become a world leader within a very large industry. At that point in time, it was probably stated as insane or very risky. Now we see, why didn't we do it? Yeah, easy in behind to say that. But we need to start forming those instruments that can be sustainable for many, many years.
Yes, so the risk-taking attitude, that's definitely can be improved on the EU level.
Europe has shown a very good, a lot of talents in doing, regulation and policies, right? As we all know, right? So, so we are falling behind on this one. If you look at the US again, it's a prime example of being pragmatic and being forward-looking, which we clearly missed. I think the regulation on fusion in the US was done 2 to 3 years ago at the federal level already. Again, that's one of our core competencies to develop policies actually in Europe. So I think we missed it here. So we need to recover very quickly. And again, financing, as quite a few of my colleagues mentioned before, it's extremely difficult to do a startup in Europe. I can believe it's my 5th one. I can tell you that it's very, very difficult. Number one, financing, right? And we don't have the big, private VCs that you can find in the US, but we do have public money, right? So it's a matter of putting our acts together and go for it, and again make a bold move, right? Which is not that bold anymore, by the way.
It's not only the money, but it's the money, it's also the regulation, because if you regulate and Europe says, yes, now we're going to go into fusion, the investors are coming. I don't think it's a VC game. It's more endowment funds and whatever you're coming into, because it's a big number game. However, if Europe shows, yes, we're going to go into it, so this clear statement, yes, we're going to do it. The US did it with the big Bolden, Biden, whatever he did, the PPP. We're part of this PPP program, so we know what works and what doesn't work over there. However, Europe needs to set a clear, yes, we're going to go, like the Taiwanese did with the ship manufacturing. Yes, we're going to go into fusion. Then the investors will also follow, and then the regulation. And look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 others you have in Europe. How stupid you are if you're not going to use that.
And picking up on Sam's, how bold is it to really try to start support and invest in these type of industries that we represent? There's been a study in UK. UK has, they were pretty early on to building this industry. They are very agnostic also when it comes to different approaches and technologies and concepts. They have an attitude that they want to industrialize fusion. They are not researching the fusion, they are industrializing it, and they are pretty good at it. And they have done some calculations. How much of a black hole has it been to invest in fusion? Not at all. they have actually earned money. They have earned governmental money. For every pound they invested in fusion, they have gone 3 pounds back. Because it has already been more investments from other countries and other parts of the world that are investing heavily in their industry and development. There has been technology output that has been beneficial for medical industry and other industries, new innovations, new enterprises, creating jobs, creating tax incomes. It will most likely happen here in the EU as well.
Actually, it's going to happen because we not only have the site, we have a spin-off already. We just did it. We just spin out a technology, and it's alone 100 billion market. Because with the lasers we have and the technology we have, we could make something else, neutron source. So we did it this month already. So this is going to happen. This happened by the others as well. So this is going to happen. And
any last questions before we close? I think we have time for maybe a last question. No one? Okay, good. Well, maybe I'll just keep it very, very short. I wanted to thank everyone for coming and for your interest. I think we heard here that, it could provide, fusion will not provide a quick fix, but it could be the one big thing that could get the transformational society and our economy to net zero. It won't be easy and won't be fast, but it's worth it. We have heard that fusion can deliver on Europe's security of supply, but also to the bigger objectives and get us to the decarbonization that we need. So what we need is really a concrete and action-oriented European framework to deliver that and to make commercialization a reality in Europe. You'll hear some of these also tomorrow. You may be aware that we will have the event in the European Parliament hosted by a number of MEPs with the European Commissioner, and we will be looking forward to continuing this discussion tomorrow and in the coming weeks and months here together with you. Feel free to address us if you have any additional questions or you need more context. Because we believe that the debate is really just starting and there will be a lot to be said about fusion. Thank you once again.